And hello everyone, this is another driving video in China. In this video I will be driving from Suzhou to Hangzhou, and the novelty of this video is that I will be driving during the sunset and during the night, so you will see how things look in the dark. So this may look familiar to you. We are about to enter the tunnel below the lake in Suzhou. So this tunnel is limited at 80 km/h average speed, so you can surpass the speed, but in average you need to keep it low. Usually it's quite uncongested here at the beginning, and then there is an intersection and it gets a bit more sticky. So we will see. If you want to see a very romantic scene, stick to the video for 1 or 2 minutes, because at the exit of the tunnel you will see a very beautiful sunset. If you didn't think about anything for the Valentine's Day for your girlfriend or wife, just show this moment of this video to her, because this is the most romantic sunset you will see ever. And then we will continue below the elevated road until we join the highway after 2 or 3 traffic lights. And as usual, we will join in the G1522, and then it will start to get darker and darker, and maybe after probably I will cut this video, and in the next cut it will be the total dark black sky, in which you will see how is the visibility in the highway in the dark, and mainly how dangerous are trucks that don't have any light attached and they have cargo that surpasses the length of the truck. You will notice a bit how this thing is. And this buzzing noise, sorry, not buzzing, this horn is the dashcam, because I think gets interference from the wall of the tunnel. It's beeping all the time. I found it quite annoying at the beginning, but I got used to, so I don't want to deactivate it, because who knows, maybe it will save my life one day, in case I sleep. And here we see a Tesla Model S overtaking us, and I cannot allow an electric car overtake my fossil car, so I will press a bit the throttle, trying to follow the Model S. And we already see the exit of the tunnel, and pay attention to the sunset behind the skyline of Suzhou. Here the ramp starts. And this will be the last sunlight of the 9th of May of 2021 in the People's Republic of China. Pay attention to your right-hand side and look at that. Look at that majestic sunset behind the buildings of Suzhou, with the lake in both sides and even below, because this is an elevated road over the lake, so if you want you can call it a bridge. And now the sun is hiding behind the buildings, and this is the last sun we saw today. No, we still have a ray of sun, and now it's gone. Okay, so now we will press the throttle and take the derivation to exit the elevated road, do 2 or 3 or 4 traffic lights, and then hit the highway. And we have a BMW 5 Series overtaking us from the left, but it's fine because we take the derivation, so don't need to enroll into a race now. We will have time for that later. Okay, here we take the exit, while we see the magnificent buildings in the left. I think there is a radar here just in the middle of the ramp, and this ramp is rated at 40 km/h, but I always pass this at 50 or 60 and I never got a bill. So I think it's not a real radar. Who knows, maybe next week I will get 7 bills together. But I don't think so. Okay, here waiting the traffic light. And meanwhile nothing happens. Maybe I will talk about some tech. Maybe I have a list of subjects here. Maybe today I will talk about detonation engines, because in the previous video, the previous I talked about efficiency of petrol engines. This is somehow related subject, even if it doesn't apply directly to cars or automotive industry. It applies more to aerospace industry. So first I have to explain the concept of deflagration and detonation. A deflagration is a burning process in which the ignition front advances subsonically. It means it advances at a speed which is below the speed of sound. So mainly everything we have around that burns, or the combustion chamber of a car inside the engine, all this is subsonic, so we can call all these engines deflagration burn or ignition front engines. There is another kind of engines in which the ignition front advances at supersonic speed, and this only happens when the mix of fuel and comburant or oxygen or oxidizing agent is the exact, and the pressure and temperature conditions are the appropriate for this to happen. So it's not very likely for this to happen unless you really design the engine for this purpose. Notable engines or notable applications of detonation engines can be traced back to the time of the Nazi Germany, when they designed their V2 engines, their V1 rockets, not the V2. The V1 rockets that they were thrown to London during the war. These rockets work with a rocket engine, which was a pulse detonation rocket engine. So how this engine work? More or less it was like a single piston or single cylinder car engine, but without the crankshaft or anything else. So it's only the cylinder alone, without piston inside, and it has a spark plug and a valve. So you remove all the carter, you only leave the cylinder head. But this cylinder, the other day I was also talking about bore to stroke ratio. So this cylinder will have a bore to stroke very high, like 20 or so. So basically it's a pipe, very long, like 1 meter or 2 meters, I don't really know exactly. I think it was around 1 meter, and the diameter must be around 5 centimeters. And this will be filled with a mix of fuel and oxidizer, the same as an engine, so a stoichiometric mix of gasoline and air. And then the spark plug will ignite, and you will have the explosion. But this was designed in a manner that the stoichiometric mix and all the settings were calculated so the ignition front advances at supersonic speed. And if you watch videos on YouTube about the V1 rockets, you will see that they don't have a continuous sound, they have like a pepping sound. So they have a lot of continuous explosions, and actually it's the filling of the cylinder and the detonation of the mix inside it. And what you achieve by detonating the mix instead of deflagrating the mix is a more efficient combustion process. In theory, the efficiency is 25% higher than normal. So that's why the Germans decided for this design for the V1 rockets, because, of course, first of all, this was the first rocket in the history of the universe. So things were not very efficient. Maybe they didn't have a lot of gasoline available, so they wanted something really efficient that could arrive London with the available technology and with the maximum payload possible of explosive. So that's why they went for this design, which saved up to 25% of fuel. And after that, of course, the Nazis lost the war and everything, and the Russians and Americans took all their technologies. Nowadays, pulse detonation rocket engines are not very much used. I'm not sure if they really have any application at all. But what is... Oh, look at the left. There is an F1 championship car. Yeah, but it looks like a sticker he bought in Taobao. So I lost my point. So Nowadays, there is another technology related to detonation engines, which are rotating detonation engines. And here we are approaching the toll of the highway, and I will jump 10 seconds forward to avoid displaying my plate number. So here 10 seconds. And here we are already outside of the toll, and I will accelerate to join the G1522. Okay, coming back to detonation engines. So we have these pulse detonation rocket engines that were used for the by the Nazi Germany in the V1 rockets, not in the V2. The V2 were a more classical rocket design, more similar to the ones that Elon Musk uses in his rockets, or NASA, or Rosatom, or everyone nowadays. So the other application is the rotating detonation engines. The idea is that you don't create pulsing detonations, but you have a continuous detonation in a spheric or cylindric chamber that rotates like a swirl. So the detonation front advances, making circles, and there are actually two detonation fronts in the complete circle. So with this, there are several companies and government agencies that are working on that. I will tell you some of them. Aerojet Rocketing, NASA, Energomash, which is a Russian company, and the University of Central Florida. So most of them are working on prototypes. None of them are build anything commercially available or that has been used in official projects or manned missions. But NASA has a big hope with these rockets, because with the future of space tourism, or to settle bases in Mars or the Moon, like regular bases, and it's really interesting to have higher fuel economies, because I don't know about nowadays numbers, but a few years ago, like 10 or 15 years ago, the price in fuel of 1 extra kilogram to put in a space shuttle was $2,000 per kilogram. So this was for the low orbit. So if you want to put 1 kilogram of mass in the low orbit, this will cost you $2,000 extra. So of course, if you have a 25% economy of this, it's a huge thing. So this is the idea: is to have like a cylinder or a sphere, which is the combustion chamber. You inject the oxidizer and the fuel inside, and then the ignition front advances, rotating in the combustion chamber at supersonic speed. Then you have the exhaust with a nozzle, etc., similarly as you could have in a conventional rocket. In a conventional rocket, basically you have the combustion chamber, which inside has something looks like a shower head, and in this shower head you have a lot of holes, like pinholes. Some of them inject the oxidizer, some of them inject the fuel, and the fuel can be different things. Can be many things, similar to gasoline or acetate or kerosene, and the oxidizer can be also many things. Can be pure oxygen or other oxidizing components. And I think basically this was the idea I wanted to explain. But I think it would be great, like, if this rocket Elon Musk is trying recently, that exploded 3 times during landing in the last 2 or 3 months, and I think it has a payload of 100 tons. Imagine if you can develop an engine that is 25% more efficient. You could have increased the payload to have really huge payloads to bring to the International Space Station, to Mars, to the Moon. I find this subject quite interesting. Okay, so here we are still in the G1522. The sky looks quite bright, but this is the camera just adjusting the exposure, because the sunset happened like 10 minutes ago. So really the sky was not that bright as it appears in the video. And as far as I know, in the research of rotating detonating engines, I think the University of Central Florida, probably I know about them because since they are a university, they publish the research and all the advances they do are very available to the public. Meanwhile, the other companies are private, so they don't really need to share their information. They don't really want to share it. So I know the University of Central Florida has some problems of instabilities because when this detonating front advances, and I told you there are two detonating fronts, like one is chasing the other in this 360 degrees, so they are in phase of 180 degrees one to the other. It seems under some conditions they have an instability in which one front starts advancing a bit faster than the other, and when this happens they do not stabilize. It continues accelerating until one front catches the other. And when the two shock waves, because it's a hypersonic front, so it's a shock wave, I think, when they touch, they build up their pressures and they just destroy the combustion chamber. Not immediately, but they degrade very quickly the combustion chamber. So I think that's the problem now with these designs, is to reach the design parameters that give stable rotating combustion. The downside of these engines is noise and vibrations, I think. Since you have hypersonic things going on, of course you will have shock waves escaping the combustion chamber and the noise levels will be much higher than a deflagration engine. Actually, this was the problem with the supersonic planes, like the Concorde or the Tupolev 144. In the Concorde was a slight problem, the higher noise levels, but in the Tupolev, it seemed that it was so high that people could not even talk inside the plane. But this is normal. I mean, when you do supersonic things, it's really difficult to isolate the cabin from the noise. Okay, and here, as usual, we start to have some left lane hogs, like this Mercedes E-Class. Here, Mercedes have some logo in the rear side that I don't know what is it, but I never saw it in Europe. It's like, I don't know, like a star with four arms, but a bit stylish. And I don't know what does it have to do with Mercedes, because I've never seen in their advertisements or anything. Here we have the classical truck overtaking another truck in a two-lane highway. And the Mercedes E-Class with the fake exhaust vents. And these windows you see in the side, it's this for the noise, I think. I got the question 2 or 3 videos ago by Comrade Full Battery. But that was in Hangzhou, like when you get out of the city and you take the G2504 or the S14. Yeah, it's the S14 just before the toll. There are like big windows in both sides. That is very obviously for the noise, because there you are really close to the buildings and that road is limited at 80. So you start above 50, the noise of the tires touching the asphalt starts to be annoying, I think, to the people living close by. So these panels do a really good job at deflecting the high frequency noises. For the low frequency, you have nothing to do. And they are transparent, I guess, because if you put concrete there, then it will look like a tunnel. You will take out all the light from the road. And here we saw some windows, but I'm not really sure why in that point exactly. Because there was no building nearby. Okay, the truck is going back to his natural habit, the right lane and gas. The average consumption I made in this trip is 5.7 liters per 100 kilometers. This is a bit higher than the other way I did the previous day, which was 5.5. But I have to say 5.5 it's almost the record low I did in this path. So 5.7 is more the normal quantity. And do you see this guy just passing me using the left lane and braking immediately after? I don't understand why people brakes in the highway. For me, it makes no sense at all. Like, of course, if there is an accident or a traffic jam, you will brake, but in a clean lane like this, without slope, without anything at all, and this car is below the maximum speed, so it's not even close to 120, maybe it's at 110, and look, he's braking. Please, someone explain me this. Use more fuel, use brakes, and increase your travel time. For what?
Multiple surveillance cameras ahead.
Yes, several people overtaking me. I don't remember why here I let them overtake me. This is not my normal behavior, but I must have had a reason for that. I think there is an average speed zone, and for a while maybe I was slightly above average, so now I was compensating just before reaching the end of the average zone. Otherwise, I will never let people pass me. And I think the average zone ended here, so now I can press the throttle again. I have this feeling now,
Emergency lane camera ahead.
but not really sure because here we have this Porsche Cayenne. But I remember this Porsche Cayenne was particularly fast. Like even above the 120 limit, which is very, very rare to see this. So probably now I will follow a bit the Porsche Cayenne because I think in the last Portic we saw, I mean the frame structure with light, that was the end of the average speed zone. So if possible I will follow him a bit, but if there are many cars and it's difficult, I will just let him go. Because you see, he is really not taking any distance between the car in front and behind and doing some slalom. I only do that if it's extremely necessary. I mean, extremely necessary. So I think I will let him go, because with these left lane hogs, it's like really difficult to do anything with it. I have another car tech to talk about. 2 videos ago I was talking about the efficiency of petrol engines, so I think it matches the subject of this video because I talk about efficiency of detonation engines. But now I will come back to automotive industry, so we leave the rockets alone. You know that there was a dieselgate by Volkswagen, which it's this thing they cheated in the pollution tests. So, pollution rules have been becoming more and more strict, mainly in Europe, US, and China has a rule which copies European rule basically. So this allows car manufacturers to sell same cars in Europe and China with the same levels like Euro 3, Euro 4, Euro 5, Euro 6. Of course, here it's not called Euro 6, but it's the equivalent of Euro 6. It's something 6. And of course, it's expensive to develop new engines and new standards to match these more and more strict rules. So what Volkswagen did is to implement a system in the cars. So it used the GPS of the car, and they knew the places where in Germany the cars are tested to see how much is the pollution. Let's say there are 2 official centers or 3 in Germany, so all the cars knew where these places are. So what the system did is when the car approached, let's say at less than 50 or 100 meters of these places, it changed the engine mode in a way that it can pass the test. But outside these places, the engine mode was normal, so the pollution was above the maximum admitted by the law. So they found this and they needed to pay a lot of millions and they lost a lot of credibility because usually Germans are considered to not to do these things. These things is something more common in the south of Europe. So I have an idea that I don't understand why they don't implement it in cars. One of the main problems in nowadays cars concerning pollution, there are different things in pollution, right? There is CO, which is carbon monoxide. There is NOx, so it can be 2 or 3, I think. It's nitrogen oxides, and there are particles which mainly are HC, hydrocarbon compounds. So basically there are limits for these 3. And the problem is when you can tune the mix richness, so more or less gasoline per quantity of air, if you want to reduce nitrous oxides, you want a richer mix because this reduces the burning temperature and reduces the combination of free oxygen with nitrogen, so it reduces the NOx compounds. But this, because you are increasing the fuel to oxygen ratio, there is fuel that will not be burned, so this will increase the HC or the particles, the hydrocarbon that you exhaust. So to reduce this, you need a lean mix. You need to put less gasoline per quantity of intake air. So you see these are 2 conflicting design criteria. So it's very difficult to design an engine that has both low nitrogen oxides and low particle emissions. Now I'm talking about petrols. I don't talk about diesels because outside Europe diesels are not even a thing. So for petrol this is the thing, and also CO, so carbon monoxide also increases with the fuel richness. So there is a very narrow point which is very close to the stoichiometric mix, but I think it's slightly to the richer side. So let's say 10 is stoichiometric, maybe 10.5. It's the exact mix that allows you to pass the pollution rule. Of course, needless to say that this very constrained design affects the longevity of the engine, the power, and the consumption negatively. I don't know how to talk today. Negatively. So it means that it increases consumption, it reduces the lifespan of the engine, and what was the third thing? Well, you get the point, right? Because you are not optimizing the engine for power or for durability, you are optimizing it to pass this very strict pollution rule. So what is the wrong thing with these pollutants? NOx is bad for people if you breathe it. So it's bad for cities. It produces asthma, allergies, pulmonary disease. It irritates the respiratory tract. So it's very bad for kids. Kids who grow with a high NOx environment will have more likely allergies and things like that. And needless to say, people who already have some respiratory disease, they will be much more affected by the presence of NOx. And this is quite important with COVID because COVID affects the same parts of your body than NOx. So it's like two things together. So that's why these limits are very strict with NOx. And then you have, sorry, I didn't talk about CO2, but CO2 is related to hydrocarbons or particles. So to reduce CO2, you need a lean mix. So you have CO2, which is not directly bad for people. You can breathe quite high concentration of CO2 without a problem. I mean, quite high is lower than 1%, but the concentration in the atmosphere is around 300 ppm, so parts per million. So the concentration of CO2 that creates or aggravates the greenhouse effect, it's a very small compared to the quantity that will harm a human by breathing it. So from one side, there is the tendency to decrease carbon dioxide emissions, decarbonize the economy, decrease CO2 emission from cars. And from the other side, there is the push to reduce NOx to increase the health of people living in the cities. So that's very difficult for car manufacturers, and not only for car manufacturers, but it also affects the consumers of cars, because at the end you get a product that has less power and less worse characteristics for a higher price. So my proposal, and I don't know why this is not implemented, do what Volkswagen did in the dieselgate, basically do the same. All cars can have a GPS. It's very cheap to implement in all the cars nowadays. The GPS must have a map of the world, or at least a map of the place where it's homologated to drive in. Like if a car is sold in China, it must have a car of China. And this car must have the information of what is city and what is not city, or what is a urban area with high density of population and what is not. So when you are inside a high populated area, the engine will operate in the mode of low NOx. So this is high mix, rich mix, so high gasoline per air volume. But when you are not in a populated area, like in this part I'm now in the highway between two big cities, but far from them, here the exhaust fumes that I'm emitting don't affect directly anyone. They just contribute to the global warming by the CO2 emission, but no one is breathing this exhaust directly. So here what you want is to reduce CO2. So here you want a lean mix. You don't care if you are producing NOx, because it will get so diluted when it reaches a city, no one cares. So when the GPS detects you are out of populated areas, lean mix. When you are in populated areas, rich mix. Why they don't do this? You will have cheaper cars with more power and more reliable engines, less consumption, less greenhouse effect, and less problems for respiratory problems in cities. So why you don't do this? If Volkswagen did to cheat in a test, it's so easy. They did, and no one realized for many years. Okay, that's all my reivindication. I know it will have no effect, but I leave it there. Okay, so I think now I'm in the S12 maybe. This looks like the S12 already. So late, I'm not sure, because I was talking and I'm lost now. I don't know where I am. But it's either the G1522 or the S12. And here you see it's a bit difficult to gain positions because there are as many left lane hogs as right lane hogs. Hogs everywhere. So I think because this video is already half an hour, maybe we'll cut it here. And so the next video will be the full night already with a dark sky. and it's when we get to the S13 that you will see some crazy stuff. I will already give you some hint. There are some trucks with the cargo not really following the rules concerning security that you should follow, in particular during the night. Okay, so I will leave it here. Thank you very much for watching. For the people who is waiting for nuclear reactor simulator videos, I will do more, but the thing is, for the nuclear reactor simulator videos, I need to prepare them a bit. So I don't just sit and do the videos. I use the simulator for a while, and when I find something interesting, then I do the video. So now I don't have much time, that's why I didn't publish any for a while, but I plan to do more on the RBMK simulator, and I have some ideas about the steam drum and the condenser, and I have several things I want to do. And most importantly, I want to repeat the accident test, the Chernobyl 1985 accident, with an improvement, which is de-fixing xenon in cheat engine just before the critical runaway, which I didn't do the last time. So you know that I use tuning of xenon to get the exact configuration of the reactor at the moment of the runaway, but then I left xenon fixed, which is not realistic because in reality, due to the very fast growth and the level neutron reached very quickly, xenon was burned up very quickly also, thus accelerating the critical runaway. So I will do this to see if this makes the critical runaway even faster, but actually it was pretty fast already, like 3 or 5 seconds from 1% to nominal. So we'll see. It's several things I have in mind in my to-do list. And I got a comment to if I could do a video about thorium fuel. Yeah, definitely. And it's an interesting subject. I know a bit about this, and it's quite interesting. I may prepare something about molten salt reactors and stuff like that, but I don't think there is any simulator of those kind of reactors, but maybe I will just comment about that. We'll see. Okay, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.